She stood alone in the grand Carrington foyer, an island of quiet dignity amidst a storm of cruelty. The chandelier above cast glimmers on the polished marble floor, yet none of that splendor touched her, dressed in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back into a modest bun. Emily Carrington clutched a small, carefully wrapped gift. There was no name on the guest list for her. No jewelry glittered at her neck. No one greeted her with warmth. Whispers rippled across the room like poison through water. "Is that the adopted one?" Someone murmured behind a manicured hand. "I thought she was one of the hired help." Another said with a mocking chuckle. Her parents didn't defend her. They didn't deny it. They joined in. "You country bumpkin," her mother snapped under her breath, lips barely moving but venom clear in her tone. "Don't embarrass us." Emily didn't flinch. She had learned to absorb insults like rain on stone. She held her head high even as her heart clenched. Born of the Carrington blood but raised in a modest Arizona home after a hospital mix-up, she was an uninvited truth in a family built on polished lies. A DNA test at 18 had changed her life, but not their hearts. She had saved for months from her modest teaching salary in Brooklyn just to be here tonight at the birthday gala of Everett Carrington, her biological grandfather and the ruthless founder of Carrington Capital. The estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a marble monument to generational wealth, its columns rising like pillars of Olympus, chandeliers sparkling like constellations trapped in crystal. The ballroom was filled with Wall Street titans, senators, and media barons, the royalty of American finance. The air hummed with money and ego. Caviar gleamed on silver trays. Diamond cufflinks flashed under golden light. And yet, all eyes turned not toward the opulence, but to her, the unpolished stone in a room of cut gems. Hedge fund manager Richard Voss leaned lazily against a mahogany table, his $5,000 Rolex catching the chandelier's glow. "That's the adopted one, right?" he sneered, voice loud enough to carry. "Looks like she wandered in from a Salvation Army." Laughter followed, sharp and brittle. A media heiress in a floor-length $10,000 Gucci gown smirked. "No jewelry," she scoffed, nudging her entourage. "She's practically invisible." Emily stood still, her hazel eyes calm and resolute. Her gift box remained cradled in her hands, wrapped with care and hope, but hope had no place in the Carrington manor. The mockery escalated with every passing minute. Their cruelty was no longer whispered. It was broadcast. Vanessa Carrington, Emily's cousin by blood, rival by fate, stepped forward like a queen descending from her throne. She wore a shimmering emerald gown, her blonde curls a halo of poison, her smile weaponized. At 27, Vanessa had been raised in this palace of wealth, groomed to carry the Carrington name. But the DNA test had humiliated her too, revealing that she had no blood right to the empire she had ruled. And so her fury found a target. "She looks more like the maid than a Carrington," Vanessa spat, her voice slicing through the air. The room roared with laughter, the sound bouncing off marble like thunder. Emily didn't speak. Her silence was her shield, her stillness a kind of defiance. But her fingers trembled just slightly on the box in her hands. Margaret Carrington, Emily's so-called mother, approached with a face carved from stone and years of elite Manhattan pride. Her Chanel suit was crisp, her pearl earrings gleaming. She leaned in with a hiss that only Emily could hear. "Don't you ever show your small-town face in this house again." Behind her, Edward Carrington, Emily's biological father, cold as steel in a $7,000 Brioni suit, shouted loud enough for the room to hear. "You're a mistake we're forced to tolerate." Glasses clinked in mocking toast. Champagne spilled in glee. The cruelty turned from passive to performative. A senator's wife narrowed her eyes and muttered, "That dress is a disgrace to the Carrington name." Another added, "She doesn't belong here. Not with us." And so the assault continued, not with fists, but with words, each one a blade, each one drawing invisible blood. A ring of elite financiers gathered by the champagne fountain, their Armani suits spotless, their malice refined. "She's a blemish on the Carrington legacy," one sneered, flicking a cocktail napkin toward Emily's shoes. "Back to Brooklyn, sweetheart," another jeered, twirling a gold-plated pen like a dagger. "Her gift a joke," a third roared. Did she buy from a pawn shop? Even the staff, usually silent, exchanged glances, a few stifled laughs behind gleaming silver trays. A media tycoon, drunk on power and vintage wine, bellowed across the hall. She's an insult to every gal this family has ever thrown. The laughter grew, a wave threatening to drown her. Still, Emily stood motionless. Still, silent. Her chest rose with a slow breath. Her eyes did not water. Her voice did not crack. She held that gift box like it held the last piece of her dignity. The cruelty she endured was savage, deliberate, and designed to break her. But they didn't know that the tide was about to turn. Because just then, though they didn't hear it yet, a convoy of black SUVs was pulling into the estate's long private driveway. And in the back seat of the lead vehicle sat Lucas Blackwood, the most powerful man in New York, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, and Emily Carrington's husband. And when the doors finally burst open and he entered the room, his eyes saw only one thing: her. Their anger simmered beneath the surface, a wildfire waiting to erupt and incinerate the Carrington elite's polished cruelty. Vanessa Carrington, sharp as shattered glass in an emerald gown that shimmered like poison under the chandelier light, struck again. This time, her cruelty was deliberate, venom masked in elegance. As the string quartet reached a crescendo and champagne flutes clinked like delicate bells of privilege, Vanessa raised a glass of cranberry juice and waltzed toward Emily with predatory grace. With a smirk twisted by malice, she accidentally tilted the glass, sending a scarlet splash across the table near Emily's side. The deep red liquid soaked the crisp linen and splattered near Emily's dress. Gasps rippled, but none from sympathy, only morbid delight. "Oops!" Vanessa drawled with mock sweetness, her tone oozing sarcasm. "I overreact a little around foreign objects in the house." Her entourage erupted in laughter, their sequin gowns and tailored tuxedos vibrating with cruelty. The air thickened with derision. The guests, ever eager to dance to the rhythm of power, cheered the insult. Their murmurs coiled like snakes. "She's nothing, just a nobody pretending to matter." Emily stood motionless, her hazel eyes hardening into cold steel. Though her soul ached from the bruise and betrayal, her face was an immovable mask, a fortress against the storm. The grand ballroom stretched far and wide, sparkling with chandeliers that glittered like caged stars. But Emily felt caged in a box of humiliation, surrounded by walls built of scorn. The crowd's disdain wasn't silent anymore. It was deafening, deliberate. Their laughter wasn't just at her expense. It was a performance, a ritual, a public crucifixion dressed in designer labels and pearls. Vanessa wasn't finished. Her eyes flicked down at Emily's plain, elegant black dress, an intentional choice of quiet dignity in a world obsessed with glitter. She raised her voice for all to hear. "She's not just a stranger, she's a fraud," she declared, gesturing dramatically toward Emily. "Lucas Hale would never choose that to stand beside him. Not in our world." Her entourage gasped theatrically before erupting in laughter again, the sound echoing off the marble columns like bullets ricocheting in a cathedral. "She's a charity case," Vanessa sneered, "not a Carrington." Gasps and giggles followed, some of the more malicious guests even clapping. A man in a Navy Armani suit muttered, "Is this a gala or a shelter fundraiser?" Emily's fingers clenched tighter around her small, beautifully wrapped gift box. The only thing she could offer, purchased with months of savings from her job as a Brooklyn schoolteacher. Her knuckles turned white, but she didn't flinch. Her spine straightened. Her hazel eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with fire. But the humiliation escalated. From the edges of the crowd, Clara Holt, the butler who had once poured Emily tea when she first arrived to meet her blood relatives, stepped forward in her starched uniform. She wore her seniority like a crown. Her lips curled. "Miss," she said, loud enough to catch the attention of those nearby. "The service entrance is that way." She pointed toward a dim hallway behind the staircase. "We don't allow such guests in the main hall." Chuckles sparked. The staff watched, many too afraid or complicit to intervene. A few even smirked, encouraged by the attention. A maid named Evelyn Reed, crisp and cold in her gray uniform, approached next. "The kitchen needs extra hands," she said to Emily, loud and clear. You look like someone who could be useful back there. This crowd doesn't really suit simplicity. She gestured toward Emily's black dress and the modest flats on her feet, her tone dripping disdain. The guests roared with laughter. Emily's expression didn't break, but her chest rose and fell, slow, steady, controlled. Inside her, a storm brewed, and yet, outwardly, she radiated calm. Regal, even. They wanted her to crumble, to beg, to run, but she stood still, a lone figure of dignity amidst a sea of wolves. But the final cruelty came like a dagger to the heart. A tech mogul in a $6,000 Tom Ford suit, drink in hand, leaned against a marble column. "She's a fraud," he barked, nodding at Emily's gift box. "Probably wrapped that in newspaper she found at a bodega. She's here to scam her way into a trust fund." His entourage laughed, their cufflinks flashing like polished knives. Then came the cruelest words from her own blood. Preston Carrington, a cousin whose shoes cost more than Emily's monthly salary, raised his champagne. "She forged that DNA test," he spat. "You all really think someone like that belongs here? She's a con artist, a gold digger." "Lucas has been deceived," someone else shouted. "She's after the money. She's an embarrassment to the Carrington name." The ballroom echoed with a storm of slander. Rumors flew like poison arrows. Emily stood, still and dignified, her hand brushing the ribbon on her gift box. Her silence was louder than their accusations. Her stillness, a protest against her arrogance. The audience outside the scene, the readers, the viewers, the witnesses, could hardly breathe. Their hearts broke with Emily's. Their fury surged with every insult hurled. And deep within them, a desperate longing built. To see the truth rise, to see the elite silenced by the undeniable. Because the gift presentation was about to begin, and they had no idea what Emily had brought, or who was about to walk through those grand doors. On Everett Carrington's grand 85th birthday, beneath the golden chandeliers of the ancestral ballroom, Vanessa Carrington stepped forward with the poise of royalty. Her emerald gown shimmered like venom wrapped in silk, catching the light as though the stars themselves had bent to highlight her moment. With a smug smile, she extended a velvet-lined box to her grandfather. Inside lay a limited-edition Rolex, its diamond-encrusted bezel gleaming like frost under moonlight. The media swarmed instantly, cameras flashing in a blinding storm, eager to capture the moment for headlines already forming. Carrington's beloved granddaughter Vanessa shines with timeless gift. The crowd erupted in admiration. Applause rang like a carefully rehearsed chorus. Socialites leaned forward, their manicured hands clapping with polite envy. Vanessa's smile widened as she basked in their approval, her status affirmed in crystal and gold. But then another figure stepped forward, quietly, with no entourage and no glittering jewels. Emily approached. Her black dress was simple, yet elegant, dignified in its quiet strength. In her hands, she held a small, neatly wrapped gift box. She stepped into the spotlight with calm composure, her hazel eyes steady, though the weight of the room's judgment pressed heavy on her shoulders. She offered the gift to Everett, a jade bracelet, its stone a soft, radiant green. "I found this in a Brooklyn antique shop," she said gently. "It reminded me of peace and the strength of something timeless." She had saved her modest teacher's salary for over a year to afford it. Months of sacrifice condensed into a single gesture of love. Margaret scoffed immediately. "Oh, a handmade piece?" she sneered, her Chanel brooch gleaming with disdain. "How quaint." Edward chuckled, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Probably an Etsy special." "What, $50?" he muttered. Laughter spilled through the crowd like broken glass across marble. The guests joined in the mockery. Their scorn came in waves, polished, public, and designed to humiliate. Emily's fingers brushed against her tightly pinned bun, steadying herself. Her expression didn't falter, but inside, the betrayal burned like acid. The cruelty of the moment wasn't just social. It was a public erasure. A lead photographer, James Clean, stepped forward in a tailored navy blazer. His eyes narrowed with entitlement as he approached the gift table. "We're only shooting the real Carringtons," he said, his voice cutting and cold. "Step aside, miss." He nodded condescendingly toward Emily's black dress. "You're not on the shot list." Stay out of frame. Laughter followed again, crueler this time. The media turned their lenses away from Emily, their cameras trained like weapons on Vanessa and her gleaming Rolex. Emily stood, pushed into the shadows, the box still cradled in her palms. The crowd's applause for Vanessa became a judgmental roar. They had made their verdict without trial. Emily was invisible until the room shifted. Everett's longtime friend, Mr. Bernstein, a silver-haired gentleman in a crisp three-piece suit, stepped forward. At 70, a legend in East Asian antiquities and museum curation, he moved slowly but deliberately. His eyes scanned the jade bracelet in Emily's hand. His brow furrowed. He adjusted his glasses and studied the stone more closely. "This isn't just jade," he murmured. "This is pure Burmese jade. Exceptionally rare color. Look," he turned the piece, his voice rising. "That's a consecration mark from a 19th century Tibetan Lama. This bracelet was blessed. It's not something you buy. It's discovered, preserved." The ballroom froze. The laughter died mid-chuckle. The photographers hesitated. Vanessa's smile flickered, her confidence draining, as if the spotlight itself betrayed her. There must be a mistake," she whispered, but her voice was paper-thin. The guests' whispers shifted, from mockery to stunned awe. Margaret paled, her Chanel suit slipping from her shoulder. Edward looked down, as if hoping the marble floor would open beneath him. And then the moment fractured completely. The grand doors burst open with thunderous force. The string quartet's melody halted abruptly. A low rumble swept through the room as all heads turned. Lucas Hale had arrived, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, sharp as judgment. Flanked by 3 black-clad bodyguards and his private chauffeur, he commanded the space like a storm in a still sea. At 38, born in Chicago, Lucas was a formidable CEO of Hale Enterprises, one of the most powerful business magnates in America, a name spoken with reverence across Wall Street. He didn't glance at the guests. He walked straight to Emily. He took her hand, kissed it with reverence, and turned to Everett. "My apologies for being late," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "I was stuck in a meeting with the Treasury Department, but there was no way I'd miss the birthday of my wife's grandfather." The ballroom inhaled sharply. A hush fell. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim in reverence. Vanessa's gown faded into irrelevance. Her Rolex looked like costume jewelry in a high school play. Lucas turned slowly to Margaret and Edward, his smile polite, but razor sharp. "I understand you've never acknowledged Emily as your daughter," he said, the room hanging on every word. "Allow me, then. She's not only my wife. She's the reason Hale Enterprises has just committed a $2 billion investment into Carrington Capital." The crowd gasped. Champagne flutes trembled. Reporters snapped back into action, but now their cameras swarmed Emily. Lucas continued, "And there's one condition. Emily will personally oversee the entire deal." Edward's buy-in suit suddenly seemed too tight. His face turned ashen. Margaret blinked rapidly, as if waking from a dream that had turned nightmare. Lucas turned back to the crowd. "She's outmaneuvered boards I couldn't crack. She's earned every victory. Your family failed her, not the other way around." The guests erupted in thunderous applause, their earlier mockery drowned in awe. Emily stood radiant, not because of wealth, but because truth had finally lit the room. Then Everett Carrington rose from his velvet chair. His cane tapped the marble floor, a single sound that echoed like a gavel. "I've stayed silent long enough," he said, his voice strong for his 85 years. "Today, I officially declare Emily Carrington as my sole legal heir. From this moment forward, anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The string quartet sat frozen. Vanessa's emerald gown now seemed gaudy, her Rolex a relic. Margaret's spine straightened in defiance, but her eyes revealed fear. The reckoning was immediate. Vanessa was stripped of her privileges. Her PR team backed away. Security escorted her to the foyer, her fall from grace complete. Margaret and Edward were publicly sidelined, their legacy undone by their own cruelty. And Emily stood tall, her jade bracelet glowed like a crown forged in love and vindication. The estate had been reshaped. And history would now remember this night as the fall of Carrington arrogance and the rise of Emily Carrington, heir wife and queen of her own fate. The aftermath was swift and brutal, an elegant purge of the estate's once untouchable elite. Influence, once wielded like a sword, was now reduced to dust. Social invitations vanished as if erased from existence. Richard Voss, the hedge fund magnate who had mocked Emily's modest black dress, found himself blacklisted from every future Carrington event. His prized Rolex, once a symbol of exclusivity, now felt like a relic from a fallen empire. The tech mogul who'd ridiculed her jade bracelet was quietly removed from the guest list of all major Carrington functions, his digital empire no match for the power of legacy redefined. Clara Hull, the once feared chief of staff and unofficial gatekeeper to Carrington's social life, was reassigned to storage logistics, her career buried in the estate's basement along with forgotten china. The guests who had dared to laugh had no punchlines left. They adjusted their cufflinks. Suddenly self-conscious, their authority nullified under the weight of public disgrace. Emily stood beside Lucas, her figure steady, her black dress no longer a mark of exclusion, but a silent crown. The small jade bracelet nestled inside the gift box had become a symbol not of poverty, but of purity, of truth that couldn't be bought or silenced. The audience's hearts, once hardened by elitism, now pulsed with admiration, their anger transmuted into pride. Emily's victory was no longer just personal. It was a firestorm that seared through the lies, arrogance, and hypocrisy that cemented the estate's hierarchy. Lucas Hale, towering beside her in his sharp charcoal suit, was no longer just a billionaire CEO. He was judgment incarnate. His voice cut to the ballroom like a gavel falling in a court of justice. "You dare to mock Emily Carrington," he said, his hazel eyes a storm brewing under perfect control. "The very soul of this family's legacy. Your wealth, your pedigree, your handshakes and backrooms, none of it outweighs her truth." With a flick of his wrist, he raised a sleek black tablet and tapped the screen. One by one, names appeared in red. Vanessa Carrington, event privileges revoked. Margaret Carrington, social clearance revoked. Edward Carrington, board membership terminated. The Council of Carrington Capital had spoken, and its decision was final. "You've lost more than a party," Lucas continued, eyes trained on Vanessa's ashen face. "You've lost your place in history. You've lost your honor." Gasps erupted like a thunderclap. Glasses trembled. Cigars were quietly stubbed out. Faces paled. A symphony of ruin played out in real time. The Carrington Empire was being reshaped, brick by brick, lie by lie. Emily stood still as the epicenter of it all, her black dress catching the crystal gleam of the chandeliers, her eyes fierce and clear. Vanessa, who had only a moment ago been a star of flashing bulbs, now stumbled off the ballroom floor. Her emerald gown no longer shimmered. It sagged like an overplayed costume. Her limited edition Rolex hung heavy on her wrists, now a parody of wealth. Margaret's Chanel suit no longer held power. It drooped on her shoulders, her scowl offering no shield. Her escorts, once symbols of elegance, now marched her silently toward the service exit. Edward, red-faced and defeated, fumbled with his cufflinks as if they held the last of his dignity. The rest followed like a procession of regret. The tech mogul who'd laughed too loudly. The congressman's daughter who'd whispered rumors. The staff who had smirked behind polished trays. Each one now faced the bitter harvest of their cruelty. Their prestige was dust, their influence void. They stepped forward one by one, their designer shoes muffled against the velvet carpet. Richard Voss stood first, face gray under the lights. "I was wrong to mock Mrs. Hale," he said, his voice hollow, the Rolex on his wrist suddenly a badge of shame. The congressman's daughter clutched her faded Gucci gown. "I shouldn't have spread lies," she muttered, her words barely audible. The senator's wife followed, tears staining her concealer, her apology a confession. The ballroom watched in stunned silence. The staff were the last approach, their uniforms stripped, their positions dissolved. Clara Hull's clipboard was gone, her gaze lowered. Their careers ended in the same place they had laughed, on that cold ballroom floor. And yet Emily stood untouched. Her presence was sovereign. Her silence, once dismissed, now radiated a strength that eclipsed legacy, name, and money. Her black dress shimmered faintly beneath the fading chandelier light. Her gift box, so small and humble at the start of the evening, was now sacred, a token of quiet resilience that had outlived every status symbol in the room. Lucas stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. He had brought the storm, but Emily had been the spark. Their power was shared, but her truth was the one that had dismantled the rot. What no one knew, what the guests, the press, even her parents had failed to see, was that Emily's journey hadn't begun in marble halls. She was born in a modest Arizona town, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. At 17, Emily won a state science fair. At 18, she earned a scholarship to NYU. At 20, she discovered through a DNA test that she bore Carrington blood, but her parents had turned her away, too ashamed to accept the truth. At 25, she met Lucas at a charity gala where she volunteered as a coordinator, not a guest. Her quiet intelligence had captivated him amidst a room of noise. Their wedding in a small Brooklyn garden had been private, a union forged not from titles, but from grit and mutual admiration. Now, Emily stood not as a newcomer, but as a reckoning. The guests, staff, and even the media could no longer look away. The jade bracelet she carried, sourced from forgotten antique shop, consecrated by Tibetan monks, was the artifact that had undone centuries of deceit. She stood still, her bun like a crown, her silence louder than any speech. A junior staff member approached, voice low and trembling. "Mrs. Hale," she said, no longer mocking, but full of awe. "Your gift is extraordinary." Her eyes glistened with regret. The rest of the guests retreated, their alliances shattered, their family names suddenly burdened by scandal. The media pivoted, their cameras now following Emily with reverence. Headlines forming like whispers on digital tongues. Emily Carrington, the true heir who rewrote the legacy. She turned toward the open terrace, Lucas's warm gaze guiding her. The chandeliers dimmed behind them as if bowing. The spring night waited, stars blinking with quiet approval. They stepped onto the marble terrace hand in hand. The Carrington estate was forever changed, not by power, not by wealth, but by one woman's unshakable truth. They once called her the lost child. Turns out, they were the ones who had lost their way.